So I've had my SIM tucked away inside of the Poco F6 Pro for the past few days, and to slightly misquote that wise and candid philosopher of our times 50 Cent, I'm loving it like a fat kid loves cake. This marvellous mid-ranger boasts meaty performance for gaming on the go. You got 120 watt fast charging for the sizable battery, a fresh 50 meg light fusion camera, and only a few wee disagreeable bits like absolute heaps of crapware as usual. So come with me as we take a closer look at the Poco F6 Pro, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So as far as modern smartphones go, the Poco F6 Pro isn't really anything remarkable. It's another 6.67 incher, pretty standard. And it's got a proper heft as well, weighing in at just over 200 grams. That design is a wee bit iPhone-esque, if not quite as chunky. I certainly would have preferred more rounded edges. You got some ever so slight curvature around the arse end. I'd say it's slightly more comfortable to clutch than an iPhone, but only barely. Up front, it's Gorilla Glass 5, apparently, which I was expecting at least a bit of Victus from the Pro model, but hey-ho, especially as that's apparently what's slapped in the regular Poco F6, but you do at least have a pre-installed screen protector on there. Those bezels aren't horrifically chonky, and the selfie cam orifice is suitably dinky. And while Poco may have skimped a wee bit for the glass, at least you've got a proper metal frame stretching around the edge of this thing. Lends a more premium vibe to the Poco F6 Pro. And then that back end is once again made of glass, although apparently not Gorilla Glass. Poco didn't really specify exactly what it was, but what I do know is that after roughly a week of testing and using it as my full-time phone, there's no scratches or scuffs or nicks on there. It's in much better shape than my arse, that's for sure. You've got a whopping great choice of two different colours, black or white. And I've got to admit, I'm still not entirely sure on my exact feelings towards the weird patterned design here. For some reason, it just reminds me of the bathroom tiles in a Berlin hotel I once stayed in. My first reaction was similar to a husband walking in on his wife in bed with both of his neighbours and their dog. And I've got to admit though, over time it's kind of grown on me, even though I've still got some pretty horrendous memories of that Berlin bathroom. I blame the schnitzel. And thankfully that matte finish means that the Poco F6 Pro's rear end is highly resistant to grimy, greasy fingerprints. Although this glossy area up top around the camera lenses is an absolute haven for dust and muck. And the smooth finish means that the Poco F6 Pro is rather slippery as well. Oh, and it's IP54 splash and dust resistant, so definitely don't go dropping it into water. Will not enjoy that one little bit. Now, next to no surprises on the software side, it's Xiaomi's latest freshest HyperOS drizzled on top of Android 14 as always. And Xiaomi seems to have sorted it out a bit when it comes to the software updates as well, because you've got the guarantee of 3 OS updates here, Android 15, 16 and 17 beyond that, and 4 years of security patching. How regular will these security patches be, especially in 3-4 years? Well, we'll see. I'm certainly happy enough on the security side of things. You've got a built-in optical fingerprint sensor. This is nice and nippy and responsive. I've had absolutely bugger all issues with this thing. Got that face unlock as backup, and of course you've got the usual fantastic amount of customization in here, lots of great theming. The always on display is an actual always on display which you can schedule or just have on all of the time. I'm still a fan of that security app which can help to cleanse your smartphone, get it running as efficiently as possible. You've also got the very helpful block lists to get rid of all that spammy bollocks. You've got Xiaomi's rather respectable gaming mode as well for boosting the performance, blocking notifications, yada yada. And thankfully no major issues or the battery this past week testing the Poco F6 Pro. Occasional tiny wee bits of jank, stuff like notifications not popping up until I actually open up the app, fairly standard. And the do not disturb not actually not disturbing for a bit for some reason. Things that are pretty annoying but won't exactly have you hoying your phone out the window. What is annoying though is the sheer amount of crapware once again stacked on this thing. Like, it's not quite bad enough to boil your piss, but that piss is definitely starting to get rather warm. Warm enough that you wouldn't want to stick your finger in it, and not just because it's piss. What am I even on about? Just cut this bit, right? And even though you've got up to 1 terabyte of storage with the Poco F6 Pro, I'd still highly recommend just going through and deleting all of this bollocks just so it's a bit more streamlined. And whatever you do, don't load up Snake Zone. The music alone will have you praying for the end of days. It's literally just this forever. Now, like many mid-range rivals, the Poco F6 Pro comes packing a 6.67-inch AMOLED display, not too far off the surprisingly premium panel that was also slapped on the older F5 Pro. It's a 3200 by 1440 pixel panel, so your photos, your videos, everything will look supremely crisp and finely detailed, as long as you remember to boost the resolution in the display settings. That gorgeous panel supports 12-bit color reproduction, as well as HDR10 and Dolby Vision streaming support in the likes of Netflix. You've got a variety of color modes to choose from in those display settings as well. It's quite poppy on the default setting. Nice rich tones, and also the high brightness mode hits around 1200 nits with peak local brightness of 4000 nits. The upshot being that when I was using this phone outside, even under quite harsh sunlight, I had no trouble seeing what I was actually trying to do. And as you'd expect, refresh rate maxes out at 120 Hz. You can manually fit it to either 60 or 120, that's it. And like the regular Poco F6, you've also got a stereo speaker setup with full Dolby Atmos support. It's not quite as loud as the regular F6 speakers, but the audio quality is a wee bit better. If you're stuck in quite a noisy environment, like a busy kitchen with pans clattering and family members wibbling on, then you'll probably struggle to hear what is actually being said if you're enjoying a YouTube video, perhaps of your favourite bald tech twat. And sadly, there's no headphone jack here on the Poco F6 Pro, so it's basically Bluetooth streaming or a bit of dongle action if you're desperate. I had no issues with the wireless audio streaming, though. I had a couple of wee little judders in the stream when I was out and about in central London, the likes of London Bridge Station, but very, very tiny. And I was using LDAC at the time, so not too surprising. And no need to moan when it comes to performance, because the Poco F6 Pro is powered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which may be roughly a year and a half old right now, but it's still an absolute banger. And ably assisted here by 12 gigs of RAM. Certainly the everyday experience was perfectly smooth. Wasn't any annoying slowdown when I was trying to use the camera or anything like that. As I mentioned before, you've got that usual feature-dense HyperOS gaming mode, complete with a performance booster tool. And with that switched on, I found that Genshin Impact played practically flawlessly on the most testing graphics mode. That frame rate was well regulated to keep things as smooth as possible, no matter quite how mental everything got and how many gribblies were desperately trying to tear off my testicles and use them as decorative bookends. Meanwhile, that spacious screen is supremely sensitive with 2160Hz touch sampling, especially ideal if you want to play online shooty type stuff like PUBG. Poco's Liquid Cool Tech 4.0 action helps to blot out any hotness, so the F6 Pro keeps its cool under pressure, and if you're gaming for over an hour. On the connectivity front, it could have been a wee bit better. However, I found that certainly here at home, my reception isn't quite as good as it usually is on other smartphones. And certainly when I had a little trip to Norwich last weekend, I was struggling to find signal in places, although to be fair, that might just be Norwich. Now, the battery stuffed inside of here is slightly smaller than the older Poco F5 Pro. It's a 5000 mAh capacity cell. But thankfully that battery life is still ruddy marvellous. I haven't had a single day where I've run out of charge before I've been all tucked up with Teddy at night. And I've had some pretty long, intense days with this thing. I'm talking 6 to 7 hours of screen on time, lots of camera action, of course, testing out the optics. A bit of video streaming, bit of video chatting over the likes of Skype, and quite a lot of audio streaming in the background when the phone's been hibernating as well. I found at the end of the day, I usually end up in battery saver mode, but usually with about sort of 10 to 15% charge remaining. And even if you did find yourself running mysteriously low on juice throughout the day, well, no worries at all, because you got support for that bonkers fast 120 watt hypercharge tech or whatever it's called. And that is ludicrously fast, powering this thing up from dead in about 20 minutes. However, sadly, there is bugger all support for a bit of wireless charging, so it's cables all the way. And let us conclude this lovely wee Poco F6 Pro review with a squint at the camera tech. Triple lens setup spearheaded by a 50 meg Light Fusion 800 sensor. Got a good bit of optical image stabilization on there as well, and Xiaomi's camera app has improved considerably over the years, so it's a lot more user friendly. Fast access to all your toggles. You've got useful stuff in there like the voice shutter, the motion track and focus if you're trying to snap a cat, kid, whatever. And if you like camera modes, well, there's certainly a fair few chucked on here. You've got a proper pro mode, so you can mess around with the white balance, the shutter speed, etc. before shooting. You've got handy features in there like a bit of focus peaking and a 50 megapixel high res mode, which is also available if you just jump back into the regular settings. I stuck with the automatic photo mode for my testing, and this pumps out some pretty good pics. Don't exactly expect realistic imagery, as the Poco F6 Pro does tend to enhance colours so they're brighter, warmer and poppier. It does make them more visually appealing. And this is just on regular auto mode without the AI feature switched on. HDR type shindiggery rarely results in any blown out saturated shots. Tricky contrast type situations are well handled by the Poco F6 Pro, so no worries if you're shooting against a bright sky or there's other strong light sources in frame. And in the evenings, the Poco F6 Pro impressed me again. As long as there's very little motion, which does result in standard blurry shenanigans, this phone can soak up lots of finer detail and limit the grain, so you will get workable snaps most of the time. The second lens on here is your basic 8MP ultra-wide angle shooter, no real surprises here. The output is quite similar to with the primary lens. The tones are once again on the warmer, bolder side. It's just a bit more cack in low light. As for that third and final lens, well, don't get your hopes up for a telephoto shooter or anything. It's just your typical craptastical 2MP macro snapper. And that 50MP high-res mode can be used to shoot very finely detailed pics, so you can then crop in as an alternative option to a telephoto shooter. It does help to sharpen things up a wee bit, but it's not a proper substitute. As for your video shenanigans, well, this can be captured at up to 8K resolution here on the Poco F6 Pro at 24 frames per second. Otherwise, you can also shoot 4K Ultra HD footage at 30 or 60 FPS. And Xiaomi has once again chucked on its nifty director mode if you want to fiddle around with the likes of the white balance, etc. In this mode, you can shoot up to 4K resolution footage, and you can also connect to other devices and use them as, for instance, a camera monitor. But even if you're just shooting video using the regular video mode on the Poco F6 Pro, you can expect some pretty nice results. You've got some dependable stabilization if you're moving and shooting at the same time. My low light footage didn't look absolutely awful. It's actually better than what I captured on the Pixel 8a at the same time. I did notice a wee bit of audio distortion when I was shooting outdoors, and it was a bit blustery, however. And then up front on the Poco F6 Pro, you've got a 16MP selfie cam, which is okay. It does tend to overexpose shots if there's any kind of backlighting, and the night performance isn't exactly fantastic either, so yeah. And there you have it, my lovelies. That in a nutshell is the fresh new Poco F6 Pro, which I've got to say I really rather liked this past week. A few little complaints like the sheer volume of crapware as usual, a couple of wee bits of jank here and there. Of course, the fact that it's Gorilla Glass 5 up front and a couple of other little what seems to be cost-cutting measures, I guess, in order to make the rest of the phone so bloody good. Anyway, that's what I reckon. It'd be great to hear your thoughts on the Poco F6 Pro down in the comments below. Please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech. Oh, and don't forget to check out my Poco F6 versus F6 Pro unboxing as well, which is live hopefully right now or in the very, very, very near future. That's about enough banging on from me. Have yourselves a bloody wonderful rest of the week. Cheers, everyone. Love you.